as people are trickling in, shuffling in, barefoot, in sandals, whatever their footwear of choice is, I just want to share a little something personal. Those of you that know me know I'm not necessarily shy, but sometimes I do shy away from this sort of setting where I'm introducing and emceeing. But I actually asked to introduce this one today because this panel and this theme in particular means a ton to me. My very first week at ASU, which was July 2019, my very first task was to get the ASU campus ready for enterprise-wide Slack. I've been a fan of Slack for many years personally and have been a personal power user. But coming to ASU and seeing students, faculty, and staff adopt it and use it creatively has been one of the biggest joys of my career, because what we've been able to do is see the creativity demonstrated by students, staff, and faculty firsthand, ideas that I would have never thought of. And what's so special about that is students are getting to try new and emerging technologies, but master them in a way where they're intuitively taking ownership over them, which is then setting them up for success, not only in the workforce of today, but helping them shape the workforce of the future. So shameless plug for mine and Work Pond session directly after this flagpole, where we'll be sharing our top lessons learned from the rollout of Slack on the ASU campus. But before then, we're going to set the tone for this day of asynchronized swimming, of supporting learners and staff and faculty in the digital campus by welcoming representatives from Slack and from Deloitte. So I am so pleased here today to introduce Christina Kosmowski, Vice President and Global Head of Customer Success and Services at Slack, as well as Stephen Hatfield, Global Future of Work Leader at Deloitte. Take it away, Christina and Stephen.
Thank you so much. We are so excited to be here and thrilled that you are such a Slack champion and all the work you've done at ASU. So excited to talk about that a little bit today. So my name is Christina Kosmowski. I head up our global customer success team here at Slack. And what that means is our job is to ensure that our customers get the maximum business value out of our Slack platform and are having a positive experience while doing so. So we have a team of customer success managers. We have a series of programs and assets that we provide to our customers. We have professional services, we have training and education, and we have the renewals team, all to help support that. And I'm very excited to be joined by Stephen Hatfield, who is a real visionary in this future of work. So Stephen.
Thank you, Christina. Very happy to be here. By way of introduction, a lot of what we talk about comes from our Human Capital Trends Report, which we've been doing now for 10 years. And Deloitte began to see the trend lines around the changes in future of work back in like 2017. And then in 2018, the firm asked me to step into leading our efforts globally. And I spent all of my time managing our research agenda and helping our clients kind of grapple with these trends. So excited to talk to them about you.
Great. And we're lucky for the partnership with Slack and Deloitte today. So as part of the theme of asynchronized swimming, we wanted to acknowledge the complexities that are facing higher education today. So whether you're an incoming freshman, a tenured professor, an admissions counselor, an IT professional, we're all facing unique times, making it even more essential to have a clear path to connect with your peers and fellow humans. So I don't know, Stephen, if you have anything to add to that.
It's interesting as you think about what is happening in terms of the trend lines before COVID, and then when you think about the trend lines that are happening now post-COVID in terms of higher ed. So I think that defining, if you will, the capabilities, the intersectionality, the componentry, if you will, of lifelong learning becomes actually one of the most critical outputs of future of work. And as you think about the extent to which we now need to move our thinking away from that sort of 4-year in-person sort of classroom dynamic that has long been the hallmark of what you thought of when you thought of a university education, to an environment where students have many different needs with many different personas and have many different learning paths. I mean, we were seeing some of that before, as I said, like 37% of the US student body were over 25 and part-time, and actually is concerned about schooling and family and jobs as they were about their class schedule. And so how do we adapt the broader platform for learning to enable that? Because the dimension of what's going to transpire is, of course, lifelong learning. Christina, as you think about these topics, so reimagining the content, right, equipping students to enter the workforce, and building this community and collaboration, it's important to think about, I would argue, a set of different trends. So often, when future of work is being discussed, people think about it in terms of the trends around the workforce. So the dimensions of the longevity dividend, meaning that the workers will continue to have their careers for longer times. Older workers still want to contribute in different ways. The dimensions of the fact that we have 5 different generations in the workforce now, some of whom are very digitally ready and native in the Gen Z and millennial category, and some of whom, as older generations, are less so. But as you think about those dimensions of the trends around workforce, it's important to keep in mind the dimensions around the trends in terms of sort of work and the workplace. So the technologies that exist today are only moving forward more rapidly on an exponential curve. And we at the moment have about 3.5 billion people on the internet at about 4G capability, but in short order, thanks to the tech companies, we're going to have 7 billion people on the internet. They're hoping to ring the globe with low orbital satellites, and all of whom at 5G capability, which is 20 times faster than 4G. So what does that start to imply in a workplace where you can source talent anywhere, where you have an entire planet of people, the capability and talent of which are all connected in on these digital platforms, and through that, they're able to grow and learn in different ways. And so it starts to put real interesting pressure on what it is that learning actually means in that workplace context. And it starts to put really interesting pressure on who actually is the learner and who actually is the member of your broader workforce ecosystem. And so we're seeing a little bit of that disaggregated, and it has some interesting implications.
Great. Yeah, it is really interesting. And it's also important to kind of think about the community aspect as well, that's inclusive and reflective of the culture that you want to have across the campuses. And so how do you bring that agility and flexibility so students can engage in their learning journey, and really making the best of breed technologies available to the masses, and providing the space for the students to come together where they can plan demonstrations or discuss content from their classes. And it really helps even the playing field for learners and the broader campus. And so it's really exciting is that many these universities, higher educations, have already started to recognize the importance of these goals and are taking action. And one institution in particular has been on a mission to do all 3 of these. And so for the last 5 years, ASU has been recognized consistently as the most innovative university in the nation. And they've really championed their vision for preparing learners for the future, and have proven it with action by establishing a digital campus, and in their case, utilizing Slack. And so you can hear more about that at 9:15. We'll have a digital disruption and Slack session this morning. And as ASU's digital campus, Slack is really that central place where the people you need, the information you share, the tools you use, they all come together for students, professors, and the entire staff. And so fundamentally, this digital campus should build upon and further enable what was traditionally done in person on campus. And so within Slack, it really means kind of 4 key things. So the first is engagement beyond the classroom in this communal workspace for group projects, or faculty could use it for office hours and discussion once a lecture is over. So you're really extending that in-person kind of hallway discussion, or if you're working on a project within Slack. We talked a little bit about the communities and how important that is. And so you can enrich those with campus life activities, clubs, Greek life, student government, sports teams are all a great example where they can really bring this to life in the digital space. You can increase productivity for university operations like IT ticket resolution, the admissions team, onboarding new hires or new staff. And then finally, you can broaden the network of your institutions through joint research initiatives, external vendor management, or peer university collaboration.
So Christina, it's interesting is as you outline that, there were some comments in the chat, and one of them that I wanted to build on is that it isn't about the technology. The technology becomes a massive enabler, it becomes a connector, it becomes to some extent kind of the platform upon which work is done. But it actually is going to become much more about the enduring human capabilities that we bring to the table. One of our presenting questions in our trends report was, how do we remain distinctly human in a technology-driven world? And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, because I joined early enough that I took part in the mindfulness, is that building, for example, wellness into work is now becoming a critical issue, not just due to COVID, but beforehand as well. And so what that then implies for the campuses is that digitally fluent students become digitally fluent members of the workforce because they're able to use these tools in a sort of a natural way. But those tools then enable those human capabilities. And those things become storytelling and empathy and customer connection and complex systems thinking and being able to use data in ways to create insights. And as those, as students acquire knowledge on these digital platforms, the critical part will be in that acquisition of knowledge, are they also building those capabilities? And then that creates the dynamic that we're talking about the digital campus, because the technology you're using is one that enables you to be strong in the workforce. The knowledge you're acquiring, of course, is an important sort of depth to your intellectual rigor. And then the capabilities that you will use ongoing, you acquire through the teamwork and the other things you're doing to gain that knowledge.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your insight here. Certainly a call for boldness. So while folks have heard from us this morning on what we collectively need to do and solve for to best prepare for the future of education and the workplace, we're going to now hear from 3 individuals who have taken an active role in shaping what their digital campuses could and already do look like. So you're going to follow me from the flagpole to the campfire. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day and joining me. Could we just start before we jump into the Q&A portion by just doing an introduction? And I'll start with Janae.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janae Cohn. I'm really happy to be around the campfire today. At Stanford University, I support instructors in adopting critical digital solutions to support them in their teaching and learning. So happy to be part of this conversation.
Thanks. And Matt?
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Sofa. I teach information systems at the School of Business at Arizona State. Yeah, you know, I'm just very excited to be a part of this. It was really interesting hearing Christina and Steve speak, and then following the chat as we go along. This is really great. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Austin?
Hi, I'm Austin Neighbors Keating. I'm a graduate student at USC's Marshall School of Business, and I'm a member of the Graduate Student Council government, and specifically trying to help bridge that gap between faculty, staff, and students with the IT Student Advisory Council.
Well, thank you guys. Well, the first question, and quite frankly, one of my favorite questions to ask, is your favorite emoji and maybe the favorite channel you use. And so I'll tell you, for me, I consistently use the thumbs up so I can kind of quickly move through content and give my team the go ahead. But I'd love to hear, Janae, what's your favorite emoji and maybe the channel you use the most?
Sure. So I think I have in a similar vein, Christina. I love the applause emoji. I really like using Slack as a place to sort of promote positivity and energy and enthusiasm for my colleagues and my students. So that's my favorite channel. I think is sort of situational for me. It depends on what I'm trying to do and who I'm trying to talk to. But right now, I'm actually in a 30-day wellness challenge channel with some of my other staff colleagues because I imagine for a lot people relate to the understanding that's been kind of a stressful past 3 or 4 months here. So it's been nice to have some other accountability partners and doing some wellness work together and check in on Slack for that.
Yeah. We did a 28-day push-up challenge. That was really interesting as well. Matt, could you tell us what your favorite emoji and channel is?
Sure. I'll start with the channel because in all of my classroom workspaces, I rename the random channel to hallway. So I call it the hallway, where we don't talk about in-class things there. That is the hallway outside the classroom where we talk about random nonsense. With the Premier League just started to wrap up their season after they came back. And we talk about soccer, we talk about tech, we talk about movies. And so that's always my favorite channel space. We talk about all kinds of crazy things. As for emoji, I am a Trekkie from way back when, so I'm a big fan of the spot hand. That's kind of my thing. So live long and prosper.
Love it. Love the hallway channel. We'll have to use that renaming for folks. All right, Austin, how about you?
Yes. So I'll start off with my emoji. So I really like the peace sign, as I saw in the chat, the fight on. We love that at USC. So we use that a lot. And then for my favorite Slack channel, so one that's really grown on me is we have one called the Good Place. And what we've used that is to really give like uplifting stories, situations that have, been of encouragement to other students and allow us to, feel some kind of sense of community, especially being remote right now with the COVID situation. So that one has really been a powerful one for us.
I love that. I love how you guys are all using different creative emojis and channels. I could hear about these all day. Steve and I discussed kind of the concept of making collaboration more accessible through this concept of a digital campus in Slack. And so, Matt, you're a professor at ASU. Could you describe how you view the digital campus and what that means to you?
Sure. So Gen Z, late millennials were referred to as digital natives. And they come into the classroom with a little bit of that tech vernacular already, but they're not really sure how to kind of funnel that and channel that into something that's meaningful and useful. Given that, I like to try and empower that. So I typically like to think of the digital classroom as being a space where we meet the students where they are, where we traditionally, academia was all about bringing the student to the learning. And really the digital classroom is more about meeting them where they are, not necessarily forcing them to come to us. One of the reasons I started using Slack very early on, before it was adopted widely at ASU, was for my online classes to reduce the distance, the metaphorical and physical distance that exists between students. Because in an online class setting, they will never meet me, they will never meet each other. They're geographically dispersed around the United States, even around the world. And so tools like that can help really reduce that distance and let the classroom exist anywhere. So it really is more about taking learning to meet students where they are, not necessarily to kind of corral them and force them to come to where we are.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I know that I've really felt for me, since actively using Slack just with my employees, that I can really understand kind of the differences and where each of them are. And so I would love to hear, Austin, from the student reflection of what Matt just said. How are you experiencing kind of this digital campus at USC?
First off, I want to start off and say we love professors like Matt. So we really appreciate that they're trying to come to us and really doing a good job of that, especially with using technology. So for me, I have multiple roles. So from student government, I am like a facilitator. We have our own Slack that we use to communicate to students, to communicate between us. It's really a powerful tool to allow us to stay in touch with each other and keep track of conversations rather than trying to run through your email. It's been very, very useful. And then classes that I've had, it's really taken the class to the next level because we're not just stuck into that classroom time of being able to communicate to the professor, but we can say stuff that's on our mind outside of class. And it really helps drive conversation and helps set up the next class. And then finally, as a collaborator, working on a project team, it's so helpful, again, using other forms of communication, really being able to have, a channel devoted directly to that where we can post any type of media and really kind of whiteboard digitally has been super helpful for us.
Yeah, that's great. It's really powerful. And Janae, you're on the other side kind of operationalizing this at Stanford. And so I would love to understand how you've been helping kind of create that digital campus for Stanford.
Sure. So many of the strategies that Matt and Austin have already spoken to are things that we're trying to keep really core in our own strategy, right? At Stanford, I imagine at other institutions too, we believe that something that makes learning really dear to us is the social aspect, right? When we feel like other people are with us, engaged with us, and connecting our learning experiences to how what we learn impacts communities, that's when the change happens. That's when something transformative can occur. So that social value of learning, that's really what we want to keep at the core of even being in a digital campus. A myth of digital learning is that it's less personal, that you're just going to be listening to talking heads or taking quizzes and not really engaging and interacting with other people. But that's not at all what a digital campus has to be. And what I've been trying to advocate for as a real strength of digital learning is actually the ease with which you can connect with people one-on-one, flexibly, and in a variety of spaces. It's really just a matter of choosing the spaces that honor the social connections that we know are so dear to instructors, to students, to staff. So the big question we've been really trying to have our instructors thinking about is how do our tools help us design learning experiences that communicate our values? And there's still work to do to articulate what exactly those values are and how we can enact those most appropriately within our digital campuses.
Yeah, it's great. And I think, I've even witnessed my high schooler and middle schooler during this time as they shifted to online learning and just haven't had this collaboration aspect to it. And we're really trying to get kind of Slack in there because they're really, you can see it and how they're missing it. And so, Austin, you're a learner, and we're seeing that these institutions are trying to kind of foster this more engaging learning experience, especially during the trend of where we are in distance learning. Could you talk a little bit about how it's evolved for you being a student over this past year?
Yeah, one big part of the evolution has been being able to have more access to my professors. So before, we had to always wait for like office hours, right? This might be once a week and then maybe rely on email. But with Slack, I found that it's been a lot easier for me and the professor and the rest of my class to really engage and be able to answer questions in those off times that were not in class. So it's really helped, give us a sense of community with that class rather than just something we come to once a week. It's also in Slack, I felt like we have more natural conversations. It's not like writing an email when you're trying to write kind of like a short story about your situation. In Slack, you know, I've been able to speak more like how I would in person, you know, give, you know, short sentences to explain what I'm really thinking. And then if it evolves into something more that needs more discussion, can schedule that time with the professor. And then I felt, you know, my professors have been able to connect better with us students. I feel there's a lot more engagement. I know I would say a good amount of my class has become really involved, especially being able to use this tool. And that goes for, especially for students that are maybe across the globe that aren't on the same time, you know, time as the rest of us. So it's been really powerful because of that.
And we talked a little bit about earlier in our intro session around how important like the community builder aspect is, and kind of having that reflect the community that you want. Could you talk a little bit about how Slack has enabled some of that community building for you?
Yeah, so again, as you know, as in my role as being in student government, I want to reach out to as many people as possible. And while I traditionally, similar to how I explained, you know, with professors, I also had office hours. I got a little bit of engagement, but since having Slack and being able to be accessible to students that way, I've been able to get a lot more feedback and be able to stay in touch and be able to help students with, you know, concerns and problems they're facing in a more strategic way, and be able to feel like I'm not missing anyone. So I've really found that as a very powerful tool for that.
Amazing. And Matt, I would love to kind of flip this from your angle, where you've been on the kind of solutioning end of this conversation. How is ASU's focus on this learning experience kind of defined your approach as an instructor?
So part of when I sit down to build course content or design the classroom space or the working space, I go back to ASU's charter. So ASU's charter says that ASU is a comprehensive public research university, and this is the important part, measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed. And so having that nature of community, having that space where everyone feels welcome and their voice is able to be heard, is incredibly important to that, because traditionally higher education kind of has this this idea of the sage on the stage, where my voice is the most important voice in the room. I stand up, I talk, people listen, you do assignments, I do grades, done. It's not that anymore, and it shouldn't be that anymore. The conversation needs to shift from one to many to many to many. And that is kind of the empowering thing as technology evolves and allows us to have those many to many conversations. When I think about teaching anymore in light of COVID-19, we've shifted education to doing discussions over Zoom. And when I set up my Zoom space, I have my notes, and I have the chat open, and I have Slack open the entire time, so that we have this ongoing conversation. I like to think about it almost like my classroom is like a Twitch session. So those of you who don't know Twitch is the streaming gaming service where people go and they watch people play games and they engage in a conversation with them, because that lets everybody have a voice. I found in-person classes traditionally, there are the people who are always engaging, always wanting to be part of the dialogue. And then there are a lot of people who are just content to sit at the back because they're shy, or they don't want to say something that makes them sound silly, or they're embarrassed. And over a digital platform like Slack or like Zoom in the chat, some of those shyer voices tend to come out because it's something they're familiar with, and they already have a sense of community around Twitch or around Discord, these tools that they're using every day in their lives. And we're just kind of mapping the paradigm of higher education to something they're already familiar with. And it really does empower everybody, which helps fulfill the mission of ASU's charter. So I'm fond of saying learning is a team sport. And that many-to-many conversation allows the team aspect of learning to really shine. And so all of these great tools that we have really, really lift that up for everyone.
I love that, many to many, because that is the thing that email doesn't allow you to do, right? It forces the sender to have to know who to put on the inbox, but here it can open it up to this kind of wider range. So Janae, I'm going to switch topics here. You've given your role. How have you and your team kind of worked with instructors and the staff to tackle kind of this distance learning, and how has technology really played a role in that longer term strategy?
Sure. So one thing we've been trying to do with our faculty and staff is to try and model something that we think is pretty critical to building a digital campus, which is having some notion of a digital home space, right? When we are online, we need to know as learners where to go to find everything we need. Everyone has spoken to this aspect already, actually having a space where you can find the people you want to connect with, the resources you need to be successful, the space that you can play and work in. So when we're on campus, we default to certain kinds of assumptions about what our spaces do and how our spaces can enact certain forms of engagement. Actually, Matt was speaking to this just a moment ago. Sometimes in a classroom, we can very easily just fall back on that sage on the stage model, because that's what we're acculturated and accustomed to doing when we see physical markers like the podium and the rows of desks, or even worse, like the chairs bolted to the ground. That's always the worst classroom design move, right? But when we get online, we don't have those chairs bolted to the ground anymore. We don't have chairs at all. We actually get to design our own chairs, our own lecterns, our own podiums, whatever those look like. So as someone supporting faculty, that I've had to think really intentionally about, where do we design our own workshops and sets of engagements with our instructors? When do we decide what kinds of interventions around building a digital campus are critical to happen in real time, like we're doing now over a Zoom call? And when can those interactions be happening outside of real time? When will we give people opportunities to reflect and explore and investigate and connect on their own time? So I'd say that those two notions, building a digital home space and then aligning when and where learning happens with the appropriate outcomes, are really the two biggest lessons that we're, again, trying to model as staff, but that we're also hoping our faculty take with them so that they can design their learning experiences more intentionally. So we're figuring out as we go a little bit, but we've been using a variety of spaces, Slack, of course, for connecting with instructors, sharing materials informally, having playful dialogue and supporting each other, while also leveraging our other sort of university resources to make sure that instructors are seeing models for how they can build this notion of home space.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I know a lot of this is really acute right now, given kind of the current situation we're in. But beyond that, if you were to fast forward and put kind of your visionary hat on, where do you really see this going in 5, 7, 10 years from now?
So I take an optimistic take on where we're going to be 5 to 7 years from now. And I think that as faculty become more used to the process of having to intentionally design learning, that is, having to really create spaces and make those meaningful for the interactions they want to have with their students, they will also get more comfortable with making education a more inclusive experience. I think we're already talking a lot about universal design for learning and education now, and I would like to believe that in 5 to 7 years, we'll still be talking about it, but as part and parcel of every educational conversation, that we'll always be thinking about our students and our learners first, and the range of learners that will be in our classrooms. I don't know that the work is ever done in terms of making learning equitable. That's an ongoing process. We always have to be checking in with ourselves and the people we work with to make sure we're not forgetting about or excluding people that we might not have realized are part of our classrooms, but they are. So I think we'll just get more and more expansive in the next 5 years, and we'll be coming up with more solutions that accommodate that range, that increasingly diverse range of students that might be a part of the educational landscape who couldn't be, perhaps, when we were maybe so wedded to a sort of singular notion of what the university should be. When I say a singular notion, I'm really referring to more of the four-year college experience. I just want to acknowledge that two-year colleges have been doing tremendous distance learning work for quite a long time. And I think many vocational colleges have been doing the same. So I think that four-year schools are really kind of catching up in a way on where a lot of our other colleagues and other kinds of flexible institutions have been. Finally, I'll just say the other kind of component of learning I think is going to change is just, I think we'll start to reconsider the notion of when learning happens and when class happens. I think we'll start to get a lot more flexible. Again, we're already shifting in that direction. But what does it mean to have seat time? Why does seat time matter? These are questions that we'll have, I think, better answers to in 5 to 7 years. And we'll be able to really think about greater pairings between what we might consider an educational experience and perhaps some more applied, on-the-ground, experiential forms of learning.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun to watch. And Matt, I wanted to also ask you the same question. I know, where you see this in 5 or 10 years. I also know in the chat tool, there was a question specifically for you as well around some of those faculty members who may resist getting more accessible or more online. If you had any tips for getting that crew across the line. So if you could kind of touch on both of those, that would be great.
Sure. I saw that question. I was kind of formulating an answer in my head. To piggyback on what Danae was saying, I'm going to use an analogy. I like metaphor and analogy. I'm a runner. Running is my passion in life. I love to run marathons and longer distances. And one of the things about that is that the work doesn't happen when I go out for my run every day or when I go lift weights. That's not the work. The work happens when I'm recovering, when I'm resting, when I'm letting the training sink in. And that's the same kind of thing with learning. Yeah, sure, we do stuff in the classroom and we do stuff on Canvas and other learning tools that we have, but the actual assimilation of knowledge, the learning of learning, happens in the off times, in the bits in between. In terms of the 5 to 10 years thing, COVID-19 in a lot of ways has been an accelerant of many things that have been going on. It's shown where the cracks are in a lot of places, where the divisions are. It's shown the digital divide to be what it is, more so than we thought before. But it's also been an accelerant of good things. And this kind of gets to the point of the question that was in the chat from Rachel. There has been resistance to tools. I teach IT and business. And one of the things we talk about all the time is this tool fatigue. Why, when we adopt a new tool in the organization, people just roll their eyes and say, oh, it's just another tool, it's another thing. The thing that helps the most with that piece of engagement is to show rather than tell. And so anytime I get a chance where a faculty member or colleague in WP Carey comes to me and says, hey, what is this thing you're doing? I always show them. I pull up Slack and I bring up a classroom workspace or one of my administrative workspaces, and I show them the things that I'm doing. And I show them, I picked up a lot of great tips and tricks from the folks at Slack over the years, and the way that we use React-G and the way that we tag items, the way that we engage with each other changes. And when they see it, when it's actually shown to them and they get to get their hands dirty with it, that resistance piece goes away. And COVID-19 has accelerated that, because now this is our piece of engagement. We don't have in-person office hours. We don't have in-classroom experiences. The classroom and all of our engagement has become the digital workspaces. And so that has been that accelerant piece of it. So if I think 5 to 10 years out, I'm amazed at the possibilities when the tools grow, when we, the faculty who have been this, well, it's always been done this way, so we're always going to do it this way. When we've been forced to evolve, that allows the conversation to continue to grow, to continue to develop, and our familiarity with the tools to get better, because that initial resistance point has been taken away from us. You know, COVID-19 took away our agency in how we engage with the digital tools. So I hesitate to say that there's a positive that comes out of this, but there's a positive that comes out of this, and it's absolutely that. So when I think 5 to 10 years, I feel like that initial resistance point has been broken down. And the more that we're able to show and the more that we're able to teach each other, the better that this gets.
Yeah, I agree. We're definitely, you know, it's like we're still in the early stages of this change curve, and we kind of have to remember that. But if you do fast forward 5, 7 years down, we certainly will be at a different level of maturity. Austin, so we're speaking of the future. So you're about to get back into the workforce. So what will you take away from your kind of experience with the USC digital campus into your next endeavor?
Yeah, so I think especially with the ever-changing way that we'll be working now post-COVID, I think there's definitely going to be a need for being able to rely on digital tools and being able to use that in my school environment where it's okay to do it wrong or it's okay to make a mistake is great. It gives me an example to try these tools out, be comfortable with them, and then use them.
Great. Well, and that's what we're excited as well as the next generation comes into the workforce and starts to use and quite frankly demand more of these types of tools in their workspaces. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us and sharing your valuable insight. Before we go, I wanted to ask you each to give kind of one piece of advice to those here on the call who are looking to kind of enable their own digital campus. And so I'll start with you, Austin, put you back on the spot.
Yeah, don't be shy to give us a new tool as students. A lot of times it'll be used in our future or in our internship. I know this summer I've already been using things like Slack in my internship, and it's set me apart from my other peers.
Amazing. Janae, what's your piece of advice you'd share with this audience?
It's a little fuzzy, but I'm going to argue why it's tactical, which is start from a place of compassion. It's really easy. I imagine this group is full of early adopters, and it can be easy to kind of say, why aren't other people adopting the things that I think are so cool? And I know that I've thought that way before too, because I'm also an innovator and an early adopter. But when we start with compassion, that allows us to create more meaningful interventions and have more open conversations. So starting with compassion really means acknowledging the concerns your fellow faculty or staff or students have. And it means coming up with solutions that respond directly to those concerns. That might mean modeling some solutions. That might mean coming up with examples. That might mean keeping things really simple and choosing just 1 or 2 solutions to start. But starting from a place of compassion will allow us to be more strategic and allow us to get more buy-in to eventually push those innovations in the future to come.
I love that. And that is great. Great advice for all of us, because like you said, everyone's on a different pace on this change journey. Matt, what would be your piece of advice to the group here today?
Don't be afraid of change. Change is scary. Change is hard. Change happens whether we want it or not. But when we have agency in the change process, I would encourage you to not be afraid, to try new things, to experiment. That's where innovation comes from. Innovation comes from the bottom up, from us trying something, seeing if it works. We just roll with it a little bit. If it doesn't work for you, you can move on and find a thing that does work for you. But I would say don't be afraid. Embrace it. Jump in wholeheartedly, feet first, head first, embrace the change, because I think that more than anything else stymies progress. That unwillingness to adapt and evolve.
That's great. Yeah, so we heard, don't be afraid. The students want more of this, but have compassion for all the different types of folks who will be using this digital campus. Well, I know, Stephen, you're still on the line here, and you've been kind of listening to all this amazing advice and work that this panel has been doing to build out their digital campuses. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thanks, Christine. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this and to listen to sort of how it's being digested, if you will, like in the classroom, in the digital classroom. The bit of advice I might offer is, in the world that's emerging, you're going to likely have many different careers. You're likely not going to do the same thing for the next 50 or 60 years that you learned when you were first getting your education. And so the real nugget, the real underlying thrust is to have a passion for learning and to know how to learn and to be interested in learning and to explore, because that's what's going to happen. You'll move into a career in one domain. You'll get excited about adjacencies, you'll move into that. You'll get excited about something else, you'll move into that. You'll sort for logically having a different, shall we say, dimensions, if you will, of the flow of your career. Times when you're sort of working less because you're going to tend to home life, where you're doing things in a gig fashion, you're doing things as a full-time employee. And so that level of fluidity, success within it, will be all about that passion for learning and that passion for exploration. So that's the key thing to take away when you start your education.
That's great. Thank you. And I think we still have a few more minutes, so we could probably take one or two questions from the group. Is the best way for me to read some of these out of the chat, or I don't know if anyone has access to speak up?
So I've got a question, actually.
Right.
This is Samantha. Something that we get a lot are people who are a little, and this goes for really any emerging technology or anything new, who are really timid about just getting started. We've talked a lot about vulnerability, and maybe there's a little less shame involved in setting up safe, digital environments. So what are recommendations for people who may be new on this meeting here today, just to get started, just to get their feet wet?
Anyone want to jump in on that?
I will. So when I was younger and working in corporate, and I would interview people, my favorite question to ask somebody was, what do you do when you don't know how to do something? And my favorite answer to that question is, I find someone who does know something about that and I ask them for help. I think that sometimes, especially academics, we typically like to be the smartest person in every room that we're in. And so asking questions can sometimes be difficult for us. And I think that being able to put some of that aside and admit that you don't know something is really important. So if I don't know how to do something, or if I don't know a tool, I could spend hours Googling and looking at YouTube videos and trying to do those things, or I could find someone who I know is a subject matter expert and I could ask them to show me the thing, work me through the thing. I think that's essential. That hands-on learning aspect of it, showing me the thing, letting me get my hands dirty with it. I think that's important. And the first step on that journey comes from me being able to say, I don't know this, help me learn this. And so I think that's a big part of that. So
I like that. Anyone else have anything to chime in on that?
This is Janae. I'll chime in on one other thing, which is that another good starting point, in addition to asking questions, which I love as a piece of advice, is also to talk to your students. Especially as a new instructor, it's easy, and I've been guilty of this, to make assumptions about what students want from their learning. And so just to ask, what have been your most positive experiences? Where do you like to learn? how? Some students have never been asked that question before. They've never been asked what they like or that they prefer. And you can't always accommodate everything. But again, what a universal design for learning philosophy proposes, that you can create learning experiences that give students options and different ways in. And when you ask students, you can know what some of those options are, how to narrow that field a little bit for your particular class situation. The possibilities might not be endless, and I get that there are practical constraints that might come, right? You can't do everything, but people always want to be heard, right? And especially your students want to be heard. They often don't feel like they've got a ton of power.
Yeah.
Can I jump in on that? Because that's fantastic. And in a digital classroom, we have tools that do that, like throwing up a simple poll in Slack, or setting up a Google form or a Qualtrics survey to capture in real time where student sentiment lies, to be able to ask them those questions, because we typically rely on course evaluations, which is a snapshot in time after the class is complete, where I can do /poll or /poly right in Slack and say, hey, what are your thoughts about this? And I can get that feedback from them at the moment that they're experiencing it. And that lets me become more agile. That lets me be able to change things to meet them more where they are, rather than, again, trying to shoehorn them and say, no, you come to where I am. And that's fantastic. So Janae, absolutely, listening to them, asking them those questions, knowing what they need. And we have great tools for that. Great tools for that.
And if I could build on that just a little and connect it to what the future may hold for you when you enter the workforce. We're spending a lot of time with organizations now helping them think about team leadership. Leading a team in a virtual environment is a very different thing. And that team leader role is very critical. When do you do we work together on a tool like this? When do we work asynchronously? What different preferences does my team have in terms of the needs they have at home, homeschooling or wellness or whatever it might be? And organizing your team to be successful in that fashion is going to be a critical dimension of how organizations succeed. And so building those muscles when you're in an online classroom and taking that forward, will that be another real harbinger of success?
Yeah, I agree. I feel for me as a leader, my ability to kind of understand how messages that I'm sending through get received real time is extremely powerful. And I also have found doing kind of these Ask Me Anything sessions within Slack have been great for people to kind of understand maybe where I'm coming from, or even get to know me at a different, more personal level than maybe they have before, which really opens up in the employee setting for them to be more communicative. And so I think these are all great suggestions. And I know I was sitting here taking notes because I learned so much from all of you, and just even from all the comments in the chat. So thank you again to Matt, Janae, and Austin. We really appreciate you sharing your insights from ASU, USC, and Stanford. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us today as well with your incredible insight. As we discussed, there's no single solution for the future of higher education, nor the future of work. And so with all of the collective bright minds, the important call to action this morning is to really start innovating and experimenting and bringing agility now, so that we can have this inclusive way to bring together cross-campus perspectives of students, instructors, and staff. So we will be sharing some follow-up resources, including the link to the jointly authored white paper from Deloitte, ASU, and Slack that will be in the Learning Human Down by the Docs channel later this morning. So thank you, all you campers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists, Slack, Deloitte, Stanford, ASU, everyone represented on this fabulous discussion and demonstration of the power of technology as an enabler for greater human connection. And that's very much going to be the theme of a lot of what you experience today at Learning Human. Asynchronized swimming is a very intentional choice. This is all about the digital campus today. And the digital campus, the notion of the digital campus, whether we like it or not, is very much 24/7. People are learning and experiencing things anytime. The world is a habitual learning environment. So it takes this type of innovative thinking and creative uses of technology to make meaning out of this and make these experiences come alive. So in a little bit here, after everyone refills their canteens and, you know, has their breakfast, finishes up their breakfast in the mess hall. I saw a couple extra breakfast sandwiches there ready to go from Chef Gonick. So don't worry if you missed the breakfast and banter at 7:30. And then please return at 9:15 Pacific Daylight Time for breakout sessions starting, neighborhood breakout starting. They're going to be covering a range of topics that's all about this notion of the digital campus and elevating student experience, of course. And then right after that, there's going to be a host of other breakout sessions at 10:15 Pacific Daylight Time around the same theme. You're not going to want to miss it. Just to kind of give you an idea of what's ahead today, because this is just fantastic. We have Dr. Warren Zanes, best-selling author and Grammy-nominated producer. He's going to be presenting at 9:15 around American popular culture. Adobe is going to be presenting a character animator, real-time animation. You're not going to want to miss this for tips that are actually going to come in handy for this school year. Workday is hosting a session about how Florida Atlantic University is gaining new insights and transformed financial planning across the entire enterprise. And then shameless or shameful plug for Mine and Work Pond's session on digital disruption at Slack and the top lessons learned from our own rollout of Slack at ASU. More on that in the white paper available that Christina mentioned. There's going to be a fantastic session by one of our Shaping EDU storytellers in residence, Tom Hames, called Surfing Chaos, Narratives Across the Digital Divide. So all you more active water bugs may want to try that one out. Workday is also hosting Meeting the Unique Needs of Your Faculty and Student Workers, extremely important for personalization and stakeholder inclusion. We're so pleased also at 9:15 to have Sophia back for using data insights and analytics to improve remote learning. I had a blast with them, pun intended, if you caught their rocket ship presentation yesterday, which is fabulous around the campfire. And Instructure is returning with us today. Yay, Instructure. They're hosting Canvas, Community, COVID, and You. Cannot think of a more timely session for the upcoming new school year. So please pick one of these neighborhood breakouts, refill those canteens, and we'll see you back here at 9:15. And be sure to check out the Learning Human website for regularly updated information. Take us out, Karina, with sharing with us some of the beautiful art that's just unfolded before our eyes.
Hey folks, thank you panelists. Y'all are amazing. I'm just continuing to be blown away each moment, and starting off with the mindfulness and yoga was just so supreme. I know that it might be potentially overwhelming for educators to be shifting and managing being whole humans, but I think that this idea of starting with compassion, that learners are human first, and so are educators, and keeping that as our foundation to navigate together through the uncertainty of the future and continue to push the boundaries of what's possible in education. I'm feeling uplifted and inspired and re-energized to continue learning how to use Slack effectively. So thanks everyone.